Most commercial garden pesticides contain the same compounds available in cheaper, safer forms for over 100 years. There is a $3 spray you can mix in 5 minutes that handles aphids, slugs, and beetles more effectively than most store-bought products and leaves nothing on your vegetables you would not want to eat. The spray has 2 versions depending on what pest problem you are dealing with, and understanding which one to use for which pest is what separates a treatment that works from one that does not. Mixing everything together in one bottle sounds efficient, but actually reduces the effectiveness of each compound, which is why old kitchen gardeners kept separate preparations for separate problems, rather than one universal mixture. The first version handles soft-bodied insects including aphids, whiteflies, spider mites, mealybugs, and scale. The base is neem oil, which is pressed from the seeds of the neem tree and has been used in agricultural pest management across South Asia for thousands of years. The active compound in neem oil is azadirachtin, which works by disrupting the hormonal system of insects that ingest or come into contact with it. It interferes with molting, reproduction, and feeding behavior, which means insects exposed to it stop reproducing, fail to develop normally, and often stop feeding on treated plants. The disruption is specific to insects and does not affect birds, mammals, earthworms, or beneficial soil microorganisms, which is why neem oil is approved for use in certified organic agriculture and is on the EPA's list of minimum risk pesticides. To make the spray, mix 2 teaspoons of cold-pressed neem oil with half a teaspoon of plain dish soap and 1 liter of warm water. The dish soap acts as an emulsifier that keeps the oil suspended in water rather than separating, and also works as a contact agent on its own by suffocating soft-bodied insects on direct contact. Shake before each use since oil and water will separate on standing. Apply directly to both sides of leaves, paying particular attention to the undersides where aphids, spider mites, and whitefly eggs concentrate. Apply in the early morning or evening to avoid the combination of oil and direct sunlight causing leaf burn. Reapply every 5 to 7 days during an active infestation, and once every 2 weeks as a preventative treatment through the growing season. One thing about neem oil that almost every gardening guide omits, and that matters practically. Neem oil has a strong smell, described variously as garlic, sulfur, or peanuts, and it is persistent enough that fruit and vegetables harvested within 24 to 48 hours of application will carry a faint residual smell. The compound itself is not harmful and breaks down rapidly in sunlight and soil, but if you are harvesting tomatoes, cucumbers, or herbs the day after application, rinse them thoroughly. Most experienced growers apply neem spray 2 to 3 days before any planned harvest, specifically to allow the smell to dissipate fully. The second version handles slugs and hard-bodied beetles, including Japanese beetles, cucumber beetles, and flea beetles. Slugs cannot tolerate salt compounds and certain plant-based compounds that disrupt their mucus layer, and beetles can be deterred with a spray using garlic and cayenne pepper combined with dish soap. Crush 4 to 6 garlic cloves and let them steep in 2 cups of hot water for 20 minutes, then strain out the solids. Add half a teaspoon of cayenne pepper and half a teaspoon of dish soap to the strained liquid and dilute with an additional liter of cold water. The garlic sulfur compounds and capsaicin in the cayenne are potent feeding deterrents for most beetle species. Beetles that land on treated foliage and attempt to feed encounter the sulfur and capsaicin compounds and typically leave without completing feeding. Applied to the base of plants and along soil lines, the same spray creates an environment that slugs avoid crossing, since both garlic sulfur compounds and cayenne are irritants to the slug's exposed skin surface. This garlic cayenne spray needs to be reapplied after rain since it washes off, and in dry conditions every 4 to 5 days during peak beetle season. It is also genuinely safe to spray directly on leafy vegetables, herbs, and fruiting crops, since both garlic and cayenne are food ingredients. Rinse before eating, as you would with anything grown in a garden. but there are no chemical residue concerns with either compound. For slugs specifically, the most effective approach combines the spray deterrent with a physical trap that can be checked and emptied in the morning. A shallow container, something like an old tuna can or jar lid, filled with cheap beer and sunk into the soil with its rim flush with the soil surface, attracts slugs through the CO2 and yeast compounds in the beer. Slugs follow the scent, fall in, and cannot get back out. This costs essentially nothing and removes the slugs already present in the garden, while the garlic cayenne barrier deters new ones from approaching plants. Old kitchen gardens used both approaches simultaneously because each addressed a different phase of the problem. One catches what is already there, and the other stops more from arriving. Now for the overnight claim in the title, because it deserves the same honest treatment given to every claim in this series. For aphids treated with the neem and dish soap spray, the direct contact action of the dish soap causes rapid results in soft-bodied insects within hours of application. An aphid colony sprayed directly and thoroughly in the evening can show dramatically reduced numbers by the next morning because the dish soap component acts immediately on contact by blocking the respiratory spiracles the insect uses to breathe. The neem azadirachtin effect on reproduction and molting takes longer, usually several days to work through the colony, but the immediate contact action from the soap component is what delivers the overnight result for a heavy infestation treated thoroughly. For beetles, the spray works as a deterrent and feeding disruptor rather than a direct contact agent. So overnight results means significantly reduced feeding damage by morning rather than dead beetles. There is one more application of neem oil worth covering that most home gardeners never learn because it is not on the product label of most retail bottles. Neem oil can be applied as a soil drench rather than a foliar spray. And when used this way, it addresses soil-dwelling larvae and root pests rather than above-ground insects. Mix the same 2 teaspoons of neem oil and ½ teaspoon of dish soap in a liter of warm water, then pour it slowly around the base of plants directly into the soil rather than spraying the leaves. The azadirachtin in the oil is taken up through the root system and distributed throughout the plant tissue, making the plant itself mildly unpalatable to insects that feed on it. This systemic effect typically lasts 7 to 10 days before the compound breaks down and needs to be reapplied. Soil drench applications are particularly effective against fungus gnats, root aphids, and the larvae of vine weevils that live in soil and feed on roots rather than on foliage. It is also the application method that organic greenhouse growers use to protect seedlings during their most vulnerable early growth stage before they are large enough to tolerate repeated foliar spraying. There is also a timing principle worth understanding that applies to both spray versions and that old kitchen gardeners followed intuitively without naming it. Most beneficial insects, including bees, hoverflies, parasitic wasps, and ladybugs, are active during the warmest parts of the day from mid-morning to late afternoon. Most pest insects, including aphids, whiteflies, and many beetles, are also most active during those same hours. Spraying in the early morning or evening targets the period when beneficial insects have returned to shelter and pest. Insects are either beginning or ending their active period. This timing is the single most important factor in making a spray program genuinely selective rather than indiscriminate, and it is why experienced organic growers treat spray timing as rigorously as spray formulation. These 3 ingredients, neem oil, dish soap, and garlic, cover the majority of pest problems in a home vegetable garden for a total cost of under $3 per season. A bottle of cold-pressed neem oil costs between $8 and $12 and makes dozens of spray batches. A head of garlic costs under $1. Dish soap is already covered from the earlier video in this series. Old farming practice never separated pest management from the pantry because the compounds that protect humans and animals from pests, the sulfur in allium plants, the bitter compounds in neem, the capsaicin in peppers, are the same compounds plants evolved to defend themselves. Reconnecting kitchen and garden inputs is not a new idea. It is simply the older and less profitable version of what the pesticide industry packaged and sold back to us. If you mix the neem spray this week, Apply it in the evening on a day when no rain is forecast for the next 24 hours, and check the plants the following morning before watering. If you are dealing with slugs, set out 3 or 4 beer traps at the same time and check them at dawn. The combination of both approaches on the same evening gives you the most complete picture of what is actually happening in your garden overnight. Let me know in the comments which pest is causing the most damage in your garden right now, because that tells me exactly which formula and timing to cover in more detail in the next video.